So you have solved 500 LeetCode problems and you have done like dozens of to-do app, but still can't get a job. So if you are a junior developer right now, you must have heard all this advice like grind more LeetCode, build some more project, and just keep applying or just complete another bootcamp. But here is the thing, the game has completely changed in the last 2 years and most of the people are still playing by their old rules. So in this video, I'm going to break down what all points you need to focus on as a fresher or as a junior developer to actually get hired and what's actually going on in the job market. Before directly jumping into the video, if you're a fresher and a junior developer watching this video, make sure you watch this video to the very end and it has some points that you really need to understand. So what's changed? 2 years ago, if you could code, you could get hired. You build a CRUD app and maybe know some React, JavaScript, Node.js or whatever language you prefer and solve a few algorithms problem in an interview and you were actually good to go. And then AI coding assistant come to the picture. Coding assistant like ChatGPT, Claude can build an entire application in a minute, and suddenly company realize that they do not need an individual who can just code anymore. But here's the dark reality. If all you can bring to the table is the ability to code, well then AI coding assistants are doing it for free. The entry-level developer jobs has been drastically reduced between these 2 years and the CS graduates unemployment rate is kind of double the average. But some of the developers are still getting the offers. In fact, they are getting multiple offers. So what are they doing differently? Let me break this down for you. So the first question everyone asks is DSA really important? So I have seen these posts like multiple times on Twitter, LinkedIn, where people are just asking that is DSA is really important now, where that the coding assistants are here for help, and how much do DSA do they really need to actually get hired? So the answer would be yes. You need to learn DSA, you need to understand the DSA, but there is a difference between DSA mastery and DSA literacy. All you need to know is ability to recognize pattern, ability to know what to use where, but not the actual kind of stats that you have solved 900 LeetCode problems or you have solved 500 LeetCode problems. I'll get into it, what I mean by DSA literacy or DSA mastery. So let me show you what I mean by this. I'm going to use Rust for an example. So we'll be more realistic than just a basic string matching. Let's say you are building an API, as you can see on your screen, that needs to process request concurrently. So here is the naive approach that you might take, right? As you can see, I have a counter that is being defined as arc, and I have a vector that a mutable vector called handles, and I'm just looping in 1,000 times, right? So this will be a naive way that everyone can come up for the problem statement. This works, but here's a problem. Every thread over here is fighting for the same mutex lock, as you can see. With 10 concurrent requests, it is fine. With 1,000, it could be slow, right? Your performance absolutely tanks because threads are spending most of their time waiting for the lock, and instead of doing the actual work, your throughput kind of collapses under the load. So let's say, let's get it simple by, let's say if you have a list and you have a list of 10 users in it, right? So what I'll do is in a vector, I can just use some strings, right, as a name. So if I want to know whether the substring exists in a vector or not, what I'll do, I'll just check whether the vector dot contains that substring or not. Well, see, it is good for 100 users, right? Good for 10 users, 100 users, even 500 users. But what if your list has 1 million users? So think about that. So now, as you can see, this is the same functionality that we are doing, right? But now we are using atomic operations over here. So no mutex, no lock conditions, right? And each thread can increment the counter without blocking the other thread, right? So this is what I mean by DSA literacy. Can ChatGPT suggest both of the thing? Yes, absolutely it can do. Can it tell you which one to use? Maybe it can tell you. So here solving multiple DSA question won't be any help, because, or maybe it could be an help, but that would be an overhead, because you only need to know what to use when I have to optimize the performance. So this is what I mean by DSA literacy. So earlier you can see we have used arc and there were mutex and lock conditions, right? And after using this atomic operations, the thread is just incrementing the counter without getting into the lock. This will drastically reduce the load even when there are multiple of the items in the list. So here is what you actually need to know. You need to understand big O notation well enough to know when something is going to be messy. You need to know when to use vector, versus when to use an hash map versus when to use a hash set. You need to recognize pattern in your code. Take recursion for example. You should have the ability to understand, you should first of all you should understand recursion, what it is. You don't need to solve hundreds of questions of recursion. You only need to recognize the pattern in the code if the recursion is there, and you need to understand it so that you can debug it if anything goes wrong, right? These are the points that you need to really work on. You could understand all these points and recognize patterns without actually worried about like being able to solve 900 or 500 LeetCode problems. Just learn the fundamental, understand the traits of, then quickly move on to the things that actually matters. Now that AI can code pretty much everything, so what AI can't do, maybe these points if we can get our hands on, maybe we can be AI resistant, or maybe that separates us from the rest of the developers that are just blindly doing things. A few things I'm going to discuss here that are kind of AI resistant and that will separate you from the most of the junior devs or freshers, and you need to focus on these three things along with your whatever you are doing, right? So the first would be thinking from the architectural point of view, right? So think about from the architectural point of view, because AI can just give you a function and it can build you a feature, but it cannot think a bigger picture, right? So let me just give you the example. So let's say you are building an API, or you are building a kind of an application that uses a backend, right? That is a monolithic architecture. So AI can suggest you that you can use microservices, but you have to think that you only have 100 users or maybe 1000 users. Do you really need a microservice? Adding a microservice is unnecessary complexity here, right? So these bigger picture decisions like do you really need to use caching, or maybe your database has clearer relationships between the tables, so would you be able to use MongoDB or PostgreSQL? So these are the bigger picture decisions that you need to make, and that will separate you from the entry level developer that is just blindly copy pasting the projects that AI gave. The second skill you need to acquire is debugging code, and a messy code specifically. It shows how you are thinking. It shows the ability of like any individual that how it solves or approaches a problem. So make sure you debug enough, and you should be able to read the stack traces and just follow the errors to the target basically. And companies love this stuff. So in an interview, if you can talk about how you spend a very few hours or few days even to trace down maybe a race condition, so this is way more impressive than saying that I have done like 500 LeetCode problems. Now the third part that you really work on that is very highly underrated is communication, and communication is the skill that you need to develop. And if you have heard many of the teachers online, I would quote Akshay Saini, the OG of front end. He said that if you are not able to explain what you are thinking, and if you are not able to explain what you did, it is also a kind of a negative factor in an interview, because if you can't explain anything and you are not able to ask right questions, then it's a red flag, a complete red flag. And even if you are thinking in right way and you can't just express this to the interviewer or any of your fellow mates, then that could be a problem. So you really need to work on the communication skills. And next part would be your portfolio. So this is also an important thing, and you have to make a good portfolio. Instead of just building simple to-do app, try to focus on the open source contributions. Try to create some complex apps that you can show it on your portfolio, and instead of just directly saying that okay, this I have done, try to mention what all things you have done and why you choose them. So for an example, as I already discussed, if there are clear relationships of your tables in your database, then instead of MongoDB you choose PostgreSQL, because there are only 1000 users on your website, so you choose to stay on the monolith architecture rather than going microservices. So all these things you have to write down on your portfolio. Maybe you can create a blog of what all errors do you face and how you really solve them and what you really learn from them. The important thing as a fresher and as a junior dev you would really look for it are the open source contributions. Contributing to an open source is really a factor right now, because as a fresher you have to gain some experience, and even though you can't get a job, then how you could be an experienced dev, how you can show to an interviewer that you have really worked with a real production grade code base and you are able to deal with the other contributors as well. You are able to contribute be it code wise or just giving important suggestions. So open source contribution satisfies that thing. So without actually getting hired, you are just kind of gaining an experience, right? Alright, so let's sum up this video with all the things that we have discussed. First of all, you really don't need to grind all all those LeetCode questions every day, right? Because all the developers that are getting picked by the companies, they are not grinding LeetCode every day. They are working on real projects. They are adding some valuable contribution to the project. So making an open source contribution, effective communication, and DSA literacy is all you need to make yourself separate from others and actually get hired. Alright, I hope this video helped you, and if this does, then make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and the comment box is open. Make sure you just be mindful on the comment box. Alright, I'll see you next time. Bye bye.